Rain hammers against cracked windows. A girl's hands shake under the weight of 4 scalding plates. Somewhere in Chicago's darkest corner, a nursing student is about to collide with the city's most dangerous man, and their collision will ignite a war that bleeds across every shadow the underworld owns. One accidental touch, one forced marriage, one impossible choice between survival and surrender. This is the story of how a monster learned to bleed, and how the girl who should have run became the only thing powerful enough to save him. Stay until the end. Hit like. Comment your city so I can see how far this story travels. Let's begin. The stench of burnt garlic and desperation clung to everything inside Mama Lucia's Italian kitchen, like a second skin. Serena Vale moved through the cramped dining room with practiced efficiency, balancing 4 steaming plates of carbonara on her left arm, while her right hand clutched a pitcher of ice water so cold it numbed her fingers. Sweat pooled at the base of her spine despite the freezing November rain battering the windows. Her sneakers squeaked against cracked linoleum tiles that hadn't been replaced since the Clinton administration. She was 23 years old and drowning. Not metaphorically, actually drowning, in hospital bills that multiplied faster than she could count them, in student loans that laughed at her pathetic monthly payments, in the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that made her wonder if maybe her body would just give up one night and save her the trouble of quitting. Her father was dying. Stage 4. Pancreatic cancer with a side of medical debt. So catastrophic, it should have come with its own horror movie soundtrack. The doctors gave him 6 months. The insurance company gave him nothing. And Serena, beautiful, broke, barely holding on Serena, gave him every dollar she could steal from her own future, which was how she ended up working double shifts at a failing restaurant in Little Italy, serving overpriced pasta to tourists who tipped in loose change and complained about portion sizes. "Table 7's getting impatient," Marco hissed from behind the bar. He was 60, balding, and perpetually sweating through shirts that screamed vintage in the worst way possible. "You gonna move or grow roots?" Serena didn't bother responding. She just moved. The dining room was packed tonight despite the weather, or maybe because of it. People loved pretending they were in some mob movie when they ate here, surrounded by faded photographs of Frank Sinatra and fake newspaper clippings about Prohibition-era gangsters who probably never set foot in this dump. The whole place was a lie, wrapped in marinara sauce, and sold to idiots who thought ambiance meant dim lighting and Dean Martin on loop. She delivered the plates with mechanical precision. Smile, nod, refill the water glasses. Pretend she didn't notice the middle-aged businessman at table 9 staring at her legs like they were the special of the day. "Excuse me, sweetheart." She turned, smile still locked in place. "Yes, sir?" "This pasta's cold." It wasn't. She'd pulled it from the kitchen 30 seconds ago, but arguing with customers was a luxury she couldn't afford, so she just nodded and reached for the plate. That's when the door opened. The rain roared louder for just a moment, carrying with it a gust of wind so violent it rattled every picture frame on the walls. Conversations died mid-sentence. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Even Marco stopped pretending to wipe down the bar. Because standing in the doorway, surrounded by 4 men in tailored black suits that cost more than Serena's entire year of rent, was Lucien DeMarco. She knew who he was. Everyone in Chicago knew who he was. The Ice Prince. The youngest Mafia boss to ever control the city's underworld. The man whose name got whispered in the same breath as words like ruthless and untouchable and don't even think about crossing him. Serena had seen his face in newspapers, heard the rumors that followed him like ghosts, but nothing, absolutely nothing, had prepared her for the reality of him. He was tall, 6'3" at least, with shoulders broad enough to block out the doorway behind him. Dark hair swept back from a face that looked like it had been carved by someone who understood violence as an art form. Sharp jaw, sharper cheekbones, and a scar that cut clean through his left eyebrow, like someone had tried to split his face open and failed. But it was his eyes that stopped her heart. Amber. Dark as aged bourbon and twice as dangerous. They swept across the dining room with the casual arrogance of a man who owned everything he looked at, until they landed on her. Serena forgot how to breathe. "Mr. DeMarco," Marco's voice cracked like a teenager hitting puberty. We weren't expecting you tonight. Your usual table is... Oh, I'll sit wherever I want." Lucien's voice was low, smooth, and edged with the kind of authority that didn't need to be loud. He moved into the restaurant like a predator entering familiar territory, his men fanning out behind him with hands resting inside their suit jackets. Serena should have moved, should have stepped back, disappeared into the kitchen, done literally anything except stand there frozen like an idiot holding a plate of lukewarm carbonara. But her body had apparently decided tonight was the night to completely betray her. Lucien walked past table after table, his presence sucking all the oxygen out of the room, until he stopped directly in front of her. Up close, he was even more terrifying. She could smell expensive cologne mixed with something darker, leather and gunpowder and secrets. "You work here." It wasn't a question. Her voice came out strangled. She cleared her throat. Tried again. "Yes. Can I get you a table?" His gaze traveled over her face with unsettling intensity, like he was memorizing every detail. The tiny scar above her left eyebrow from a childhood fall, the exhaustion bruising the skin beneath her eyes, the way her pulse hammered visibly at the base of her throat. "What's your name?" This was wrong. Everything about this moment felt wrong. Men like Lucien DeMarco didn't ask waitresses their names. They didn't look at ordinary girls like they were puzzles worth solving. "Serena." Something flickered across his expression, too quick to name. "Serena," he repeated, and the way he said it, slow, deliberate, like he was tasting each syllable, made her skin prickle with awareness. "I'll take the back booth." He moved past her, and Serena finally remembered how her lungs worked. The next hour blurred into controlled chaos. She wasn't assigned to Lucien's section, but Marco shoved her in that direction anyway with a look that screamed, "Don't screw this up." So she found herself approaching the back booth where Chicago's most dangerous man sat surrounded by his soldiers, all of them watching her like wolves, deciding whether she was prey or entertainment. "What can I get you?" She kept her voice steady, professional, ignored the way Lucien's eyes tracked every micro-movement she made. "Whiskey? Neat." He paused. "You look tired." The observation landed like a slap. "I'm fine." "You're lying." Heat crawled up her neck. "With all due respect, Mr. DeMarco, what I am is none of your business." One of his men tensed. The air pressure in the booth dropped 10 degrees. But Lucien just smiled. And it was the most unsettling thing Serena had ever seen. Not cruel, not kind. Something worse. Interested. "Bring the whiskey," he said quietly. "And water. You look like you're about to collapse." She wanted to argue. Wanted to tell him to take his observations and his expensive suit and his terrifying smile straight to hell. But she was tired. So tired. And fighting with a mafia boss seemed like a really efficient way to end up as a statistic. So she brought him whiskey. And when she returned with his glass, she found him watching her with an expression she couldn't read. "How much do you owe?" Serena's hand froze halfway through setting down his drink. "Excuse me? Medical bills, student loans, whatever's carving holes under your eyes." Lucien leaned back against the leather booth, completely relaxed, like they were discussing the weather instead of her personal financial apocalypse. "How much?" Her first instinct was to lie. But something about the way he asked, calm, clinical, like he was assessing data instead of prying, made the truth slip out before she could stop it. "None of your business." 200,000? He tilted his head. 3? She laughed. Actually laughed because the number was so absurd it stopped being real. "Try 400 and climbing, but thanks for the concern." She turned to leave. "Serena." She stopped. Didn't turn around. "I can make it disappear." The words hit her like ice water. Slowly, carefully, she turned back to face him. "What?" Lucien's expression remained unreadable. $400,000. Gone. Your father gets the best care money can buy. You finished nursing school without working yourself into an early grave. He paused. All you have to do is say yes. Every alarm bell in Serena's brain started screaming. Yes to what? Dinner. She blinked. You want to pay off almost $500,000 in debt for dinner? I want to pay off your debt because I can. Dinner is how you'll thank me. His eyes never left hers. One meal, that's all I'm asking. It was insane. Completely, obviously, dangerously insane. Men like Lucian DeMarco didn't hand out charity. They made investments. And Serena had watched enough true crime documentaries to know that accepting money from a mafia boss was basically signing your soul over in blood. "No," she said. Something dark flashed across his face. "No? I don't know what kind of women you're used to, Mr. DeMarco, but I'm not for sale." Her hands were shaking, but she forced herself to hold his gaze. "Keep your money. I'll figure it out myself." For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then, impossibly, he smiled again, wider this time, showing teeth. "You will," he agreed, "but not the way you think." Before Serena could ask what the hell that meant, he stood, dropping a stack of $100 bills on the table that could have covered her rent for 3 months. His men rose with him, moving like a synchronized unit. Lucian stopped directly in front of her, close enough that she had to tilt her head back to maintain eye contact, close enough to see the gold flecks in his amber eyes and the way a muscle ticked in his jaw like he was restraining something violent. "I'll see you soon, Serena Vale." He walked out, and Serena stood there in the middle of Mama Lucia's failing restaurant, holding an empty tray and wondering why the hell Lucien DeMarco knew her last name when she'd never told him. 2 days later, her father's medical debt vanished. Not reduced, not restructured. Completely, impossibly erased. Like someone had reached into the hospital's financial system and deleted $400,000 of charges with the casual ease of clearing a browser history. Serena got the call at 6 in the morning from a cheerful administrator who sounded genuinely confused. "I'm not sure how this happened, Miss Vale, but according to our records, your father's account has been paid in full. There must have been some kind of anonymous donation. We're still investigating, but in the meantime, you don't owe us anything." The phone slipped from Serena's numb fingers. She knew. Of course she knew. Lucien DeMarco had bought her father's life without her permission, without her agreement, without even bothering to ask if she wanted to be in debt to the most dangerous man in Chicago. She should have been furious. She was furious. But underneath the anger was something worse. Relief. Sick, shameful, overwhelming relief that her father would live long enough to see her graduate, that she wouldn't have to choose between textbooks and treatment, that maybe, just maybe, she could breathe for the first time in 2 years. Serena made it to the bathroom before she threw up. When she finally dragged herself back to her apartment, a studio in Pilsen that smelled like mildew and broken dreams, she found a black envelope wedged under her door. Heavy cardstock. Expensive, the kind of paper that whispered old money and older threats. Her hand shook as she opened it. Inside was a ring, diamond, massive, set in platinum and probably worth more than her entire life savings would ever reach. And underneath the ring, written in sharp, elegant handwriting that looked like it could cut skin, "Marry me, or I'll take back everything I gave you, and more. You have 48 hours to decide. Choose wisely." Serena's legs gave out. She hit the floor hard, the ring tumbling from her hands and skittering across cheap linoleum. This wasn't happening. This couldn't be happening. But the ring glittered in the dim light filtering through her window, undeniable and impossible, and absolutely, horrifyingly real. Lucien DeMarco had bought her father's survival, and now he was collecting payment. She didn't sleep, couldn't eat. Spent 47 hours and 53 minutes staring at that ring like it was a live grenade, trying to find an escape route that didn't exist. Because the math was simple, brutal, inescapable. If she said no, Lucien would undo everything. Her father would die drowning in debt. Her future would collapse. And based on the casual way he'd threatened her, Serena had zero doubt he'd make sure she lost even more than she started with. But if she said yes, she'd be marrying a monster, a beautiful, terrifying monster who looked at her like she was something he wanted to own. The knock came at exactly 48 hours, 3 sharp raps, confident, unhurried. Serena opened the door already knowing who she'd find. Lucien stood in the hallway wearing another perfectly tailored suit, this one charcoal gray that made his eyes look almost golden. Behind him, 2 of his men waited like shadows given human form. "Well?" His voice was calm, almost gentle. "What's your answer, Serena?" She should have screamed, should have slammed the door in his face and called the police, and consequences be damned. Instead, she heard herself say, "Why me?" Lucien's expression shifted. Something ancient and hungry moved behind his eyes. Because the moment you fell into my arms, I knew you were mine. I never fell into your arms. No. He stepped closer, close enough that she could feel the heat radiating off him. But you will. Serena's pulse hammered so loud she could hear it in her ears. And if I say no, then your father dies, your degree disappears, and every door you've ever tried to open slams shut. He tilted his head. But you're not going to say no. You don't know that. I know you, Serena Vale. His hand came up, and she flinched, but he didn't touch her, just held the ring between them like an offering and a threat. I know you'd set yourself on fire to keep the people you love warm. I know you're drowning and too proud to ask for help. I know you lie awake every night calculating how many shifts you need to work to buy your father one more month. Tears burned hot behind her eyes. You don't know anything about me. I know you're going to say yes. Lucian's voice dropped to something almost tender. Because you're brave enough to sacrifice yourself. And I'm selfish enough to let you. He held out the ring. Serena looked at it, looked at him, looked at the future stretching out before her like a noose disguised as a wedding veil, and took the ring. Lucian's smile could have melted steel. Good girl, he murmured and slid the ring onto her finger himself. It fit perfectly. Of course it did. The wedding is in 3 weeks. My people will handle everything. All you have to do is show up. What if I run? You won't. He leaned in close enough that his breath ghosted across her ear. But if you try, I'll find you. And I'll make sure you regret it in ways that'll make you wish you'd just married me in the first place. Then he straightened, adjusted his cuffs, and walked away like he hadn't just shattered her entire world. Serena stood in her doorway, watching him disappear, the weight of the ring on her finger heavy as a death sentence. She'd just agreed to marry Chicago's most dangerous man. And the worst part? The absolute worst part? Some dark, twisted corner of her soul whispered that maybe she wanted to. The wedding dress arrived on a Tuesday. Serena stood in the doorway of her apartment staring at the 3 people who'd materialized like ghosts. 2 women in matching black pantsuits and a man holding a garment bag that probably cost more than her car. Except she didn't have a car. So maybe it cost more than her entire block. Miss Vale? The older woman smiled with the kind of warmth that didn't reach her eyes. I'm Victoria. Mr. DeMarco sent us to begin preparations. Preparations for what? Your wedding, of course. Victoria stepped inside without waiting for an invitation, the other 2 following like well-trained soldiers. We have a great deal to accomplish in 3 weeks. Serena's apartment had never felt smaller. These people moved through her space like they owned it, setting down bags and cases, opening her closet and frowning at her Target clearance rack finds like they'd discovered evidence of a crime. I don't need help, Serena said. Victoria turned and her smile sharpened into something that might have been pity. With all due respect, Miss Vale, you're marrying Lucian DeMarco. Every photographer in Chicago will be at that cathedral. Every society page will print your picture. You'll be scrutinized, judged, and torn apart by people who've spent their entire lives preparing for moments like this. She paused. So yes, you need help. The garment bag unzipped with a sound like tearing silk. Inside was the most beautiful dress Serena had ever seen. Ivory, hand-beaded, probably Italian, definitely worth more than she'd earned in a decade. The kind of dress that belonged in magazines, not on the body of a girl from Pilsen who still bought her bras in 3-packs. Try it on, Victoria said. No. Miss Vale. I said no. Serena's hands clenched into fists. I didn't agree to be your dress-up doll. Lucian wants a wife? Fine, he'll get one. But I'm not playing pretend for his society friends. Victoria's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered behind her professional mask. Mr. DeMarco was very clear about his expectations. Then Mr. DeMarco can come tell me himself. 20 minutes later, Lucien walked through her door. He didn't knock, didn't ask permission, just appeared in her apartment like a storm deciding to manifest indoors, still wearing his suit from whatever business had occupied him before she became his problem. Victoria and her team vanished immediately, melting into the hallway with the efficiency of people who knew when to disappear. Lucien closed the door behind him. The apartment shrank. You're making this difficult, he said. Serena laughed, sharp and bitter. Good. You trapped me into marrying you. The least I can do is make you work for it. I didn't trap you. I gave you a choice. Coercion isn't a choice. No. Lucienne moved closer, and Serena hated that her body responded. Pulse quickening, breath catching, every nerve ending suddenly hyper-aware of the space between them. But survival is, and you chose to survive. I chose my father. Same thing. He stopped directly in front of her, close enough to touch, close enough that she could see the faint shadow of stubble along his jaw and smell the lingering scent of his cologne. Put on the dress, Serena. Make me. The words hung between them like a dare. For one suspended heartbeat, something dangerous flashed across Lucien's face. Heat and hunger and barely restrained violence. Then it vanished behind his usual mask of cold control. If I have to make you, he said quietly, you won't like the methods I choose. And if I refuse, then you'll walk down that aisle in whatever you're wearing now, and every camera in Chicago will know exactly what kind of man I am. His voice dropped to something almost gentle. Is that what you want, Serena? To humiliate yourself just to spite me? She wanted to scream, wanted to throw something, wanted to rewind 3 weeks and never walk into Mama Lucia's, never meet his eyes, never agree to this nightmare. Instead, she grabbed the dress. Get out. Lucienne smiled. I'll wait. I said get out. And I said I'll wait. He settled onto her battered couch like he owned it. Put on the dress, Serena. Let me see what I bought. The words hit like a slap. I'm not something you bought. No? He tilted his head. Then what are you? She didn't have an answer, so she turned and walked into her bathroom, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the frame. The dress fit perfectly. Of course it did. Serena stared at her reflection and barely recognized the girl looking back. The dress transformed her into something elegant, expensive, untouchable, everything she'd never been and never wanted to be. She looked like she belonged to Lucien DeMarco. The thought made her want to rip the fabric apart with her bare hands. Serena. His voice came through the door, low and patient. Let me see. No? You're being childish. You're being a monster. Silence. Then, yes, I am. But I'm the monster who's going to keep you safe. Something about the way he said it, tired, resigned, almost sad, made Serena's anger falter. She pressed her forehead against the door, feeling the cool wood against her overheated skin. Why? The word came out barely above a whisper. Why me, Lucien? You could have anyone. Why force someone who doesn't want you? For a long moment, he didn't answer. Then, because I don't want someone who wants me for my money or my power. I want someone real. Someone who'll look at me and see exactly what I am. His hand pressed against the door from the other side. She could feel it, solid and warm. I want you, Serena, and I'm selfish enough to take what I want. Even if it destroys me, I won't let it destroy you. His voice roughened. I'll burn the whole city down before I let anything hurt you, including myself. Serena closed her eyes, tried to ignore the way her heart stumbled over his words like they meant something. They didn't. They couldn't. She opened the door. Lucien stood on the other side, and when his eyes landed on her, everything stopped. His expression cracked, just for a second, just long enough for her to see something raw and hungry underneath, before that mask of control slammed back into place. Beautiful, he breathed. Serena wanted to argue, wanted to tell him she looked ridiculous, that this dress belonged on someone else, that she'd never be the wife he was pretending she could be. But the way he looked at her, like she was something precious and devastating and entirely his, stole every word from her mouth. The wedding is Saturday, Lucien said, his voice carefully neutral. 3 o'clock, Cathedral of the Assumption. That's in 5 days. I know. I need more time. No. He stepped closer. You need less time to talk yourself out of this. 5 days, Serena, then you're mine. I'll never be yours. Lucien's hand came up and she flinched, but he just tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear with surprising gentleness. Keep telling yourself that, he murmured. Maybe one day you'll believe it. Then he left, and Serena stood alone in her apartment wearing a wedding dress that cost more than her life, wondering when exactly she'd lost control of everything. The next 4 days blurred into a nightmare dressed up as preparation. Victoria returned with an army: hairstylists, makeup artists, people whose entire job was apparently teaching Serena how to walk in heels without looking like a baby giraffe. They invaded her apartment, her schedule, her entire existence with the ruthless efficiency of a military operation. Serena's father noticed. "You seem different," he said during one of her visits to the hospital. He looked better, actually better, not just better, for a dying man. The experimental treatment Lucien's money had bought was working. Color had returned to his cheeks. His hands didn't shake as much. It made everything worse. "I'm fine, Dad." "You're lying." Thomas Vale had been a construction worker for 30 years before the cancer. He knew how to read stress fractures. "What's going on, sweetheart?" Serena opened her mouth, closed it, tried to figure out how to explain that she'd sold herself to the Mafia to keep him alive. "I'm getting married." The words fell out before she could stop them. Her father blinked. "What?" "Saturday, 3 o'clock?" She forced herself to smile. "Surprise?" Thomas stared at her like she'd grown a second head. "To who?" "His name is Lucien." Not a lie. Not quite. "He's successful, and he wants to take care of us." "Serena," her father's voice sharpened. "What did you do?" "I'm handling it." "Handling what?" He tried to sit up, and she gently pushed him back down. "Jesus, Serena, you can't just... Who is this man? How long have you known him?" "Long enough." "That's not an answer." "It's the only one I have." She squeezed his hand, fighting back tears. "Please, Dad, just trust me. Everything's going to be okay." But Thomas Vale wasn't stupid. He looked at his daughter, really looked at her, and saw the exhaustion, the fear, the desperate edge of someone who'd made a deal with the devil. "What did you trade, Po?" he whispered. Serena's smile cracked. "Nothing I wasn't willing to give." Yes, Saturday arrived like an execution date. Serena woke up in a hotel suite she didn't remember checking into, surrounded by Victoria's team and enough flowers to supply a funeral. Someone had moved her here yesterday. Someone had packed her things. Someone had made decisions about her life while she sleepwalized through the motions. "Good morning, Mrs. DeMarco." Victoria appeared with coffee and a smile that might have been genuine, might have been practiced. "Ready for your big day?" Serena wasn't ready, would never be ready, but she nodded anyway because what else could she do? The next 6 hours dissolved into a haze of hair curlers and makeup brushes and people talking at her instead of to her. They painted her face until she looked like a stranger, arranged her hair into something elegant and complicated, squeezed her into shapewear that made breathing optional. By the time they zipped her into the dress, Serena felt like she'd been disassembled and rebuilt into someone else's idea of perfection. "You look stunning," Victoria said, and maybe she meant it. Serena looked in the mirror and saw a beautiful corpse. The cathedral was worse, enormous, Gothic, filled with people Serena had never met wearing clothes that cost more than her education. She stood in the back hallway, clutching a bouquet of white roses she hadn't chosen, listening to the organ music that signaled her final chance to run. She didn't run. The doors opened. Every head in the cathedral turned, and Serena walked down an aisle that felt like walking to her own funeral, past rows of strangers who watched her with expressions ranging from curiosity to contempt to something that might have been pity. Then she saw Lucien. He stood at the altar wearing a black suit that probably cost more than most people's cars, surrounded by men who looked like they'd kill for him without asking questions. But it was Lucien himself who stole her breath, dark and devastating, and watching her walk toward him like she was the only person in the room. Their eyes locked, and something dangerous sparked between them. Serena reached the altar on legs that barely held her weight. Lucien extended his hand, and after a moment's hesitation, she took it. His fingers closed around hers. Warm, solid, possessive. The officiant started talking. Words about love and commitment and forever. All lies. Beautiful, poisonous lies. "Do you, Lucien Alexander DeMarco, take Serena Marie Vale to be your lawfully wedded wife?" "I do." No hesitation, no doubt. like he'd been waiting his entire life to say those words. And do you, Serena Marie Vale, take Lucian Alexander DeMarco to be your lawfully wedded husband? This was it, her last chance. She could say no, could walk away, could let her father die and her future crumble, but keep her soul intact. Serena looked at Lucien and saw the truth in his eyes. He knew exactly what he was asking, knew exactly what it cost her, and would take it anyway because he was exactly the monster everyone said he was. I do, she whispered. Lucien's hand tightened on hers. You may kiss the bride. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to pull away, to refuse, to make one last stand. But Serena didn't move, just closed her eyes and felt Lucien's mouth brush against hers in a kiss that was surprisingly gentle, almost tender, and completely, utterly devastating. The cathedral erupted in applause that sounded like thunder. Serena opened her eyes and found Lucien staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. Hello, wife, he murmured. And just like that, her life as she knew it ended. Way. The reception was held at the Drake Hotel in a ballroom that looked like it had been designed specifically to make poor people feel inadequate. Crystal chandeliers, marble floors, tables decorated with centerpieces that probably cost more than Serena's monthly rent. She sat at the head table next to Lucien, smiling until her face ached, while an endless parade of strangers approached to offer congratulations that felt like veiled threats. You're doing well, Lucien murmured during a brief lull. His hand rested on her thigh under the table, possessive, warm, impossible to ignore. I'm dying inside. I know. He squeezed gently. But you're beautiful when you suffer. She should have been horrified, should have recoiled, should have thrown her champagne in his face and damned the consequences. Instead, she laughed, sharp and bitter and a little unhinged. Lucien's eyes darkened with something that might have been approval. The speeches started around 9. Lucien's best man, a scarred mountain of a man named Marcus, stood and delivered what might have been the most terrifying toast Serena had ever heard. It was all coded language and inside jokes that sounded like confessions to crimes she didn't want to know about. Then it was her father's turn. Thomas Vale had been discharged from the hospital that morning specifically for this. He stood slowly, leaning on his cane, looking healthier than he'd been in months, but still frail enough to break Serena's heart. I've known my daughter for 23 years, he began, his voice carrying across the silent ballroom. And in all that time, I've never seen her back down from a fight. She's brave, stubborn, too smart for her own good. He paused, his eyes finding hers across the room. Serena, if you're happy, then I'm happy. But if you ever need me, for anything, you call. Understand? It was a warning disguised as a blessing. Serena nodded, not trusting her voice. Thomas sat down, and Lucien's hand tightened on her thigh, hard enough to bruise. Your father's perceptive, he said quietly. He knows I didn't choose this. No, he knows you chose him over yourself. Lucien's voice dropped to something almost gentle. And he hates himself for it. The words hit like a knife between her ribs. Because he was right. They left the reception around midnight. Lucien's driver navigated through downtown Chicago while Serena stared out the window, watching the city blur past in streaks of neon and shadow. Where are we going? She asked. Home. I have an apartment. Not anymore. Lucien didn't look at her. I had your things moved this morning. Rage flared hot and sudden in her chest. You had no right. I have every right. You're my wife now. He turned to face her, and the intensity in his eyes made her breath catch. That apartment was barely fit for rats. You'll live somewhere worthy of your position. My position as your prisoner? My position as my wife. He reached out, tucking a strand of hair behind her ear with surprising gentleness. I know you hate me right now, Serena. That's fine. Hate me all you want, but I'm going to keep you safe, whether you like it or not. I don't need you to keep me safe. Yes, Lucien said softly. You do. The car pulled up to a building that looked like it had been designed to intimidate poor people. All glass and steel and architectural angles that screamed money. The penthouse, naturally. Because where else would a mafia boss keep his unwilling wife? They rode the elevator in silence. Lucien's hand rested on the small of her back. Not quite pushing, not quite guiding, just reminding her that he was there. The penthouse was worse than Serena imagined. Beautiful, massive, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Chicago's skyline. Furniture that looked like it belonged in a museum. Everything cold and perfect and utterly devoid of anything resembling warmth. "Your room is through there," Lucian gestured to a hallway. "Mine is on the opposite side of the penthouse." Serena blinked. "Separate rooms? Did you think I'd force you into my bed?" Something dark flickered across his face. "I'm a monster, Serena, not a rapist." The words should have been reassuring. Instead, they just confused her. "Then what do you want from me?" Lucian stepped closer, and Serena's back hit the wall before she realized she'd been retreating. He caged her in with his arms, hands pressed flat against the wall on either side of her head. "I want you to choose me," he said quietly. "Not because I threatened you, not because I bought you, because you want me the way I want you." "That'll never happen." "We'll see." He leaned in close enough that his breath ghosted across her lips. "I'm a very patient man, Serena, and I have all the time in the world to make you mine." Then he pulled back, straightened his suit, and walked away like he hadn't just turned her entire world sideways. Serena stood alone in her new prison, heart hammering, pulse racing, and absolutely furious at the small, traitorous part of herself that wondered what would have happened if she'd closed the distance and kissed him first. The next 2 weeks passed in a strange, suspended reality. Lucian kept his word. He didn't touch her, didn't force anything, just existed in the same space with the casual intensity of a predator who knew his prey had nowhere to run. They ate breakfast together, Lucian reading the newspaper while Serena pushed eggs around her plate. He asked about her day, her classes, whether she needed anything, like they were a normal couple instead of a nightmare wrapped in a marriage license. Serena hated how easy it would be to pretend. She returned to nursing school the following Monday. Lucian insisted on security, 2 men in dark suits who followed her everywhere like well-dressed shadows. It was humiliating, invasive, completely non-negotiable. "People are going to ask questions," she told Lucian over dinner one night. "Let them ask." "I don't know what to tell them." "Tell them the truth." He cut into his steak with surgical precision. "You married me." "And when they ask why?" Lucian looked up, and his eyes held something dangerous. "Tell them I didn't give you a choice." "That'll go over well." "I don't care what people think, Serena. I care that you're safe." He set down his knife. "There are people in this city who'd love to hurt me by hurting you. The security stays." She wanted to argue, but the cold certainty in his voice made it clear this wasn't a negotiation. So she adapted, learned to ignore the bodyguards, learned to deflect questions from classmates who noticed her new last name and the ring she couldn't take off, learned to exist in this strange limbo between captivity and something that almost resembled normal life. But at night, alone in her enormous bedroom, Serena lay awake and listened to the sound of Lucian moving through the penthouse. He didn't sleep much. She'd hear him pacing, talking in low voices on phone calls that sounded like threats disguised as business. Sometimes, late at night, she'd catch him standing by the windows overlooking the city, silhouetted against the lights like something carved from shadow. And once, just once, she'd gotten up to use the bathroom and found him standing outside her door, just standing there, watching. Their eyes met. Neither of them said anything. Then Lucian turned and walked away, and Serena locked her door with shaking hands. Everything changed the night she came home to find Lucian covered in blood. She walked into the penthouse around 10 after a late study session, expecting to find him working in his office or brooding by the windows. Instead, he was standing in the living room, perfectly still, while blood dripped from his knuckles onto the pristine white carpet. "Jesus Christ!" Serena dropped her bag. "What happened?" Lucian turned slowly, and the look on his face made her blood run cold, flat, empty. The expression of a man who'd just done something unforgivable and felt nothing about it. "Business," he said. "That's not business. You're hurt. It's not my blood." The words hung in the air like smoke. Serena should have run, should have been horrified, should have remembered exactly what kind of man she'd married. Instead, she moved closer. "Whose blood is it?" Lucian's jaw ticked. "No one you need to worry about." "Lucian, they were asking questions about you." His voice went deadly quiet. About where you go, what you do, who you talk to. So I made sure they'd never ask again. Understanding crashed over her like ice water. You killed someone because they were curious about me? I killed someone because they were a threat. His eyes burned into hers. And I'll kill anyone else who even thinks about touching what's mine. Serena's heart hammered against her ribs. I'm not yours. Yes. Lucian closed the distance between them in 2 strides, backing her against the wall with the same casual dominance he'd shown on their wedding night. You are. You can't just murder people because I can, I will, and I won't apologize for it. His blood-stained hand came up, cupping her face with surprising gentleness. I told you I'd keep you safe, Serena. I meant it. She should have been terrified. Should have seen him for exactly what he was. A monster who killed without hesitation, who trapped her in a gilded cage and called it protection. But all she could think about was the way he was looking at her, like she was something worth destroying the world for. This is insane, she whispered. I know. You're insane. I know that too. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. But I'm your insane, and you're stuck with me. Lucienne, he kissed her, hard, desperate. Nothing like the gentle press of lips at their wedding. This was heat and hunger and months of restraint finally snapping like a wire pulled too tight. Serena's brain screamed at her to push him away. Her body had other ideas. She kissed him back. Lucienne made a sound low in his throat, something between a growl and a groan, and pressed her harder against the wall. His hands tangled in her hair. His body covered hers completely, and Serena felt herself drowning in him, in the taste of whiskey and violence and something darker she didn't have a name for. Then reality crashed back. She shoved him, hard. Lucienne stumbled back, chest heaving, eyes wild. Don't, Serena gasped. Don't do that again. Why? His voice came out raw. Because you didn't want it? Or because you did? She didn't answer, couldn't answer, because the truth was terrifying. She'd wanted it, wanted him, and that was worse than anything he could have forced on her. Go to bed, Serena, Lucian said quietly, before I stop being a gentleman. She ran, locked herself in her bedroom and pressed her back against the door, heart racing, lips still burning from his kiss. And for the first time since this nightmare began, Serena admitted the truth she'd been trying to ignore. She was falling for her husband. The monster who'd bought her, trapped her, killed for her, and she had absolutely no idea how to stop it. The next morning, Lucian acted like nothing had happened. Breakfast, newspaper, polite conversation, but Serena could feel the shift in the air. Something had broken between them last night, or maybe something had finally clicked into place. She didn't know which was worse. I have a meeting tonight, Lucian said over coffee. Don't wait up. I never do. His eyes flicked up to hers, dark and unreadable. No, I suppose you don't. He left. And Serena sat alone in their penthouse prison, trying to remember who she'd been before Lucian DeMarco walked into her life and set everything on fire. She went to class, came home, did homework. Normal things. Except nothing felt normal anymore. Around 9, Marcus, Lucien's best man and apparently his head of security, appeared in the penthouse. Mrs. DeMarco, he nodded respectfully. I need you to come with me. Serena's blood ran cold. Why? Lucien's orders, there's been a development. What kind of development? Marcus's expression darkened. The kind that means you're not safe here anymore. Before Serena could process that, the power went out. Complete darkness. Then gunfire erupted somewhere below them. Marcus grabbed her arm, yanking her toward the panic room Lucien had shown her on her first day, but she'd assumed was paranoia. Move, he barked. What's happening? Someone's coming for you. More gunfire, closer now. Marcus shoved her into the panic room, a reinforced steel box hidden behind the master bedroom closet, and slammed the door. Don't open this for anyone except Lucian, he ordered through the reinforced door. Not me. Not the police. No one. Understand? Marcus. Understand? Yes! His footsteps disappeared. Serena stood alone in absolute darkness, listening to the sounds of warfare erupt in her home. Gunshots, shouting, something heavy crashing, then silence. Terrible, suffocating silence. Serena pressed her ear against the door, barely breathing. Footsteps. Slow, deliberate. Someone was in the bedroom. Serena. A voice she didn't recognize, male, smooth, amused. I know you're in there, little mouse. Come out. Let's talk. She didn't move. Didn't breathe. Your husband killed my brother last night, the voice continued. Messy business, so I thought I'd return the favor. Eye for an eye. Wife for a brother. Terror flooded through her veins, but I'm a reasonable man, so I'll give you a choice. The door handle rattled. Come out now and I'll make it quick. Make me work for it, and I'll make sure you suffer first. Serena's hand found the gun Lucian had left in the panic room. She'd never fired a weapon in her life. She clicked off the safety anyway. The door exploded inward, and Serena found herself staring at a stranger holding a gun pointed directly at her head. Hello, Mrs. DeMarco, he smiled. Time to... His head exploded. Just exploded. Blood and brain matter sprayed across the panic room walls as the man collapsed. Behind him stood Lucien, holding a smoking gun, covered in more blood than last night, eyes absolutely feral. Mine, he snarled. Then everything went black. Serena woke up to the smell of copper and gunpowder. Her ears rang, her head throbbed, and when she tried to move, strong hands pressed her shoulders down against something soft. Don't, Lucien's voice cut through the fog. You passed out. Just breathe. She opened her eyes. They were still in the penthouse, still in the bedroom, but the panic room door hung off its hinges and the carpet was soaked with blood that wasn't hers. The body of the man who'd tried to kill her had been dragged away, leaving a streak of crimson across the hardwood floor like a grotesque painting. Lucien crouched beside her, his face inches from hers. Blood splattered across his shirt, his hands, his jaw. But his eyes, those terrifying amber eyes, held something she'd never seen before. Fear. Are you hurt? His hands moved over her arms, her shoulders, checking for injuries with the frantic precision of a man convinced he'd find something broken. Did he touch you? Did anyone... I'm fine. Her voice came out hoarse. You killed him. I killed all of them. Lucian's hand stilled on her face. 6 men. They came for you, Serena. Walked into my home and tried to take what's mine. She should have been horrified, should have pushed him away, should have done literally anything except lean into his touch like it was the only thing keeping her grounded. Who were they? Rossi family. Lucian's jaw clenched so hard she heard his teeth grind. Antonio Rossi's brother came for revenge, and he brought friends. The man you killed last night was asking questions he shouldn't have been asking. Lucien pulled back, running a blood-stained hand through his hair. I thought I'd sent a message. Turns out I just started a war. Serena's stomach dropped. War? The Rossis won't let this go. They'll come again, harder, smarter. He stood abruptly, pacing like a caged animal. I need to move you somewhere safe. Safe. Serena pushed herself up on shaking arms. Lucien, nowhere is safe, not as long as I'm married to you. He stopped, turned, and the look on his face was so raw it hurt to witness. Do you want out? The words came out quiet, lethal. Is that what you're saying? You want a divorce? She opened her mouth, closed it, because the answer should have been obvious. Yes, of course she wanted out, wanted to go back to her small apartment and her normal life, and a world where people didn't try to murder her in her own bedroom. But when she looked at Lucien, covered in blood he'd spilled to protect her, eyes wild with fear he'd never admit to, standing in the wreckage of a home he'd turned into a battlefield to keep her safe, the word wouldn't come. I don't know what I want, she whispered. Lucien laughed, sharp, bitter. At least you're honest. He walked out, and Serena sat alone in a bedroom that smelled like death, trying to figure out when exactly she'd stopped wanting to escape and started wanting to stay. Marcus appeared 20 minutes later with 3 other men she didn't recognize. They moved through the penthouse like surgical strike team, cleaning blood, removing bodies, erasing evidence with the efficiency of people who'd done this before, too many times before. Mrs. DeMarco! Marcus stopped in front of her, his expression carefully neutral. We're moving you to a safe house until this situation is resolved. Where's Lucien? Handling business. What kind of business? Marcus's silence was answer enough. Serena stood on legs that barely held her weight. I want to see him. That's not advisable. I don't care what's advisable. Her voice came out stronger than she felt. Take me to my husband. Now. Something flickered across Marcus's face. Respect, maybe? Or pity. He led her through the penthouse, down a private elevator she didn't know existed, into a basement level that looked like it belonged in a completely different building. Concrete walls, harsh fluorescent lights, and at the far end, behind a reinforced steel door, the sound of someone screaming. Serena's blood turned to ice. Maybe you should wait upstairs, Marcus said quietly. She pushed past him and opened the door. The room beyond was exactly what she expected, and somehow worse. A man hung from chains attached to the ceiling, his face a pulverized mess of blood and broken bone. Lucien stood in front of him, sleeves rolled up, knuckles split and bleeding. And he was smiling. Where are they hiding? Lucien's voice was conversational, almost pleasant. I'm going to find them either way. You're just deciding how much you suffer first. The man sobbed something unintelligible. Lucien hit him again. Lucien! Serena's voice cracked like a whip. He spun around, and for one terrible second, she didn't recognize him. This wasn't her husband. This was something else, something ancient and violent that wore Lucien's face like a mask. Then his expression cleared, and he was just a man again, a man covered in someone else's blood. Serena. He stepped toward her. You shouldn't be here. What are you doing? Getting answers. He glanced back at the broken man hanging from the ceiling. Paolo here was kind enough to volunteer information about the Rossi family's operations. Weren't you, Paolo? The man whimpered. Serena felt bile rise in her throat. This is torture. This is business. This is insane shit. This is war. Lucien's control snapped like a breaking bone. They came into my home, tried to take you. And you think I'm just going to let that slide? He moved closer, and she held her ground even though every instinct screamed to run. I told you I'd burn the city down to keep you safe. Did you think I was being poetic? I thought you were being a monster. I am a monster. His hand came up, cupping her face with fingers still wet with blood. But I'm your monster, Serena, and monsters don't play fair. She should have been disgusted, should have recoiled from his touch. Instead, she leaned into it. Let him go, she said quietly. Lucien's eyes narrowed. What? Paolo, let him go. You've made your point. He tried to kill you. And you killed everyone who helped him. Serena held his gaze. Torturing him won't change anything. It just makes you the thing they say you are. For a long moment, Lucien just stared at her. Then he turned and walked back to Paolo, grabbing a knife from a nearby table. Serena's heart stopped. But Lucien just cut the chains. Paolo collapsed to the floor, sobbing. Get him out of here, Lucien ordered Marcus. Drop him at a hospital. Make sure he knows what happens if he talks. Marcus nodded and dragged Paolo away. The room emptied, leaving just Serena and Lucien standing in the aftermath of violence. You're going to get yourself killed doing this, Lucien said quietly. Making me weak. I'm not making you weak. I'm making you human. He laughed, harsh and broken. There's a difference? Serena stepped closer, close enough to see the exhaustion carved into the lines of his face. When's the last time you slept? Sleep is for people who don't have enemies. Lucien, I can't lose you. The words ripped out of him like confession. I know you hate this. Hate me. Hate everything I've turned your life into, but I can't. His voice cracked. If something happens to you because of me, I'll burn the entire city down. And I won't stop until there's nothing left. Serena reached up and touched his face. He flinched like she'd struck him. I don't hate you, she whispered. Lucien closed his eyes. You should. When he opened them again, the vulnerability had vanished behind his usual mask of cold control. Marcus is taking you to a safe house. You'll stay there until I handle the Rossis. I'm not leaving you. Yes, you are. Lucien, this isn't a negotiation, Serena. His hands gripped her shoulders. Not hard, just firm enough to make his point. The Rossis want me to suffer, and the best way to make me suffer is through you. So you're going somewhere they can't find you until this is over. And if it's never over, he smiled, sad and terrible, then you'll spend the rest of your life in hiding. But at least you'll have a life. Before she could argue, he kissed her, desperate, hungry, like he was trying to memorize the taste of her before she disappeared. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with something that looked like grief. "Go," he whispered, "before I change my mind and lock you in a cage where nothing can ever hurt you." Marcus appeared in the doorway, and Serena let herself be led away from her husband, toward a future that felt more like a prison than the penthouse ever had. But the safe house was a cabin 2 hours outside Chicago, buried so deep in the woods that Serena couldn't see another building for miles. Marcus stationed 4 guards around the perimeter and handed her a phone that only connected to Lucian. "He'll call when it's safe," Marcus said. "And if he doesn't?" Marcus's expression darkened. "Then you run. And you don't stop running until you're somewhere he never told you about." He left, and Serena found herself alone in a beautiful cage, waiting for news that her husband was either victorious or dead. The first 2 days crawled by like years. She paced, read every book in the cabin twice, stared at the phone Lucian had given her and willed it to ring. It didn't. On the 3rd day, the phone finally buzzed. Serena grabbed it so fast she nearly dropped it. "Lucien?" "Not quite." The voice on the other end was female, cultured, amused. "Mrs. DeMarco, how lovely to finally speak with you." Ice flooded Serena's veins. "Who is this?" "Someone who knows your husband very well. Better than you, I'd wager." A pause. "My name is Isabella Rossi, and I have a story to tell you about the man you married." Serena's hand tightened on the phone. "I'm not interested in anything you have to say. Not even the truth about why Lucian married you." "He married me because—" She stopped. Because why? He'd never actually explained. Just made vague statements about wanting her, needing her, being obsessed with her. "Because he's a romantic?" Isabella laughed. "Oh, sweetheart, Lucian DeMarco doesn't have a romantic bone in his body. He has a calculator. And you were a very calculated decision. You're lying." "Am I?" Another pause. "Tell me something, Serena. Did you ever wonder why your father's medical debt was so catastrophically high? Stage 4 pancreatic cancer is expensive, sure, but $400,000 expensive?" Serena's world tilted. "That's what I thought." Isabella's voice turned sharp. "Your father's debt was inflated, deliberately, by Lucian's people. They added fake charges, phantom treatments, procedures that never happened, all to make sure you were desperate enough to do anything." "No." The word came out strangled. "That's not... Then they made sure you were working at Mama Lucia's the night Lucien decided to visit. Made sure you'd be the one to serve him. Made sure you'd be vulnerable and broke and exactly desperate enough to take whatever deal he offered." Serena felt the room spin. "He manufactured your desperation, Serena. Created the perfect conditions to trap you, because Lucian DeMarco doesn't leave anything to chance." Isabella's voice softened almost imperceptibly. "I'm sorry you had to find out this way, but you deserve to know the truth before you die for a man who never loved you." The line went dead. Serena stood frozen, phone clutched in her white-knuckled grip, mind racing through every interaction with Lucian. The way he'd known her name before she told him. The way her father's debt had vanished so quickly. The way he'd appeared at the restaurant like he'd been waiting for her. The way he'd said, "I know you," with such certainty. Because he did know her. He'd studied her, researched her, orchestrated every detail of her life to make sure she'd fall into his trap. And she'd walked right into it. The phone buzzed again. Different number. Lucien. "Serena." His voice was rough with exhaustion. "Are you safe? Did you fabricate my father's medical debt?" Silence. Long. Heavy. Damning. "Serena, answer the question." Her voice came out deadly calm. "Did you fabricate my father's debt?" More silence. Then, "Yes." The word detonated like a bomb. "You destroyed my life on purpose," she whispered. "Made me desperate. Made me dependent. Also, I'd have no choice but to marry you. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Lucy? She was screaming now, tears streaming down her face. Explain to me how manipulating someone into marrying you is anything other than exactly what it looks like. I needed you. You needed a puppet. She hurled the phone across the room. It shattered against the wall. Then she collapsed, just crumpled to the floor and sobbed until her throat was raw and her eyes burned and she had nothing left inside her except rage and heartbreak and the terrible understanding that everything, absolutely everything, had been a lie. Lucian didn't love her. He'd just been very, very good at pretending. The guards tried to stop her. Serena broke the first one's nose with a lamp, stole his gun, and held the other three at gunpoint until they backed away from the door. Mrs. DeMarco, please. I'm not Mrs. DeMarco. She cocked the gun with shaking hands. I'm the idiot who believed a monster when he said he loved her, but that's over now. She ran, into the woods, into the darkness, into a future that didn't include Lucien DeMarco's beautiful lies. Branches tore at her clothes. Roots tried to trip her. But Serena just kept running, driven by fury and heartbreak, and the desperate need to put as much distance between herself and her husband as humanly possible. She made it maybe 2 miles before she heard the helicopter. Searchlights cut through the trees like knives, and then Lucien's voice, amplified through speakers, echoed across the forest. Serena, stop! She kept running. Serena. A figure dropped from the helicopter with military precision, landing directly in her path. Lucien stood there in tactical gear, eyes wild, face carved from stone. Move, Serena snarled, raising the stolen gun. No, I will shoot you. Then shoot me. He spread his arms wide. Put a bullet in my chest, end this. But you're not running from me, Serena. Not now. Not ever. Her finger tightened on the trigger, but she couldn't do it. Couldn't pull the trigger. Couldn't kill the man she loved, even though he'd destroyed her. The gun fell from her hands. Lucien moved before it hit the ground, catching her as her legs gave out, pulling her against his chest like she was something precious instead of something he'd bought. Let me go, she sobbed into his tactical vest. Please, just let me go. I can't. His arms tightened around her. I know you hate me. I know what I did was unforgivable. But I can't let you go, Serena. I'd rather die than let you go. You manipulated me. I saved you. He pulled back just enough to look at her face. Your father was dying. You were drowning. And yes, I made it worse before I made it better. But I saved him, Serena. I saved you. And I don't regret it. You're insane. A sin. I'm obsessed. His hand cupped her face. From the moment I saw you, I knew I'd do anything to make you mine. So I created the perfect storm. Made you desperate enough to need me. And when you said yes, I promised myself I'd spend the rest of my life making you glad you did. I hate you. I know. He pressed his forehead against hers. But you also love me. And that terrifies you even more than what I did. Serena's breath caught, because he was right. She did love him. Loved the monster who'd orchestrated her destruction. Loved the man who killed to protect her. Loved him with a desperation that made her want to tear her own heart out just to stop feeling this way. Take me back to Chicago, she whispered. Lucien pulled back, eyes searching hers. Why? Because if we're going to do this, if I'm going to be your wife for real instead of just on paper, then I need to see all of it. She met his gaze. The business, the violence, everything you've been hiding from me. I need to know exactly what I'm choosing. Serena, those are my terms, Lucien. All of it. Or none of it. For a long moment, he just stared at her. Then he smiled, sharp and dangerous and somehow sad. All right, he agreed. But don't say I didn't warn you. He lifted her into his arms like she weighed nothing and carried her to the waiting helicopter. And as they rose into the night sky, Serena looked down at the woods she'd tried to escape through and realized the terrible truth. She'd stopped running from Lucien DeMarco. Now she was running toward him, and there was no going back from that. They landed on the roof of a building Serena didn't recognize. Downtown Chicago, commercial district. The kind of place that looked legitimate during the day and absolutely wasn't. Lucian led her inside without explanation, down concrete stairs that smelled like mildew and old violence, into a basement that had been converted into something between a war room and a throne room. Maps covered the walls, photographs of men she didn't recognize, red string connecting faces and locations like a conspiracy theorist's wet dream. And in the center of it all, sitting at a massive oak desk, was a woman Serena had never seen before. Beautiful. 40-something. Wearing a suit that cost more than Serena's education. She looked up when they entered, and her smile was all teeth. "Lucien, you brought her." The woman's eyes traveled over Serena with clinical interest. "She's prettier than the photos suggested." "Serena, this is Catherine Marconi." Lucian's hand rested on the small of her back, possessive. "She runs the East Side operations." Catherine stood, extending a hand. "Mrs. DeMarco, lovely to finally meet you." Serena didn't take it. "You knew about what he did to me." Catherine's smile didn't waver. "Of course. I helped him do it." The admission landed like a slap. "We inflated your father's medical bills," Catherine continued conversationally. "Made sure the hospital was desperate enough to accept our anonymous donation. Arranged for you to be working the night Lucien visited Mama Lucia's." She tilted her head. "You were a very well-orchestrated project, Serena. You should be flattered." "Flattered?" Serena's voice came out flat. "You destroyed my life, and I should be flattered." "We saved your father's life," Catherine corrected. "Everything else was just collateral damage." Serena turned to Lucian. "Is she serious?" "Catherine doesn't have a sense of humor," Lucian said quietly. "But she's right. We saved your father. The method was questionable. The result speaks for itself." "The result is that I'm trapped. The result is that you're alive." Catherine's voice hardened. "Do you have any idea how many people would kill to be in your position, married to the most powerful man in Chicago, protected by an empire? You could have died broke and forgotten. Instead, you're a queen." "I never wanted to be a queen." "No one ever does." Catherine sat back down. "But here we are." Lucian's hand tightened on Serena's back. "Show her the rest." Catherine's expression shifted. "Lucien, are you sure?" "She wanted to see everything. Show her." Catherine hesitated, then nodded. She pulled out a folder and slid it across the desk. Serena opened it. Inside were photographs. Crime scenes, bodies, men and women who'd been killed with surgical precision. "These are the people who threatened you," Catherine explained. "The Rossis, their associates. Anyone who even thought about using you as leverage against Lucien." She paused. "He's killed 37 people in the last 6 weeks to keep you safe." Serena's hands shook. 37, and he'll kill 37 more if he has to. Catherine leaned back. "That's what you married, Serena. A man who will burn the entire world down rather than let anything happen to you. The question is, can you live with that?" Serena looked at the photographs, at the evidence of Lucian's obsession spelled out in blood and violence. Then she looked at him. "Is this what you wanted me to see?" she asked quietly. "The proof that you're a monster?" "I wanted you to see the truth." Lucien's expression was unreadable. "I manipulated you into marrying me. I've killed for you. I'll continue killing for you, and I won't apologize for any of it." He stepped closer. "You asked for all of it. This is all of it, Serena. Every ugly, violent, unforgivable piece of who I am." She should have run, should have screamed, should have done literally anything except step into his arms and press her face against his chest. But she was so tired of fighting, tired of pretending she didn't want this, didn't want him. "I hate you," she whispered into his shirt. "I know. You're a monster. I know that too. And I love you anyway." Lucien went completely still. Then his arms came around her like a vice, crushing her against him hard enough to hurt. "Say it again," he demanded. "I love you." Tears soaked into his shirt. "I love you and I hate myself for it, and I don't know how to stop." "Then don't stop." He pulled back just enough to tilt her face up. "Love me. Hate me. I don't care which. Just don't leave me, Serena, because I meant what I said. I'll burn the entire city down before I let you go." She kissed him, desperate, broken, choosing him despite every logical reason not to, and Lucien kissed her back like a drowning man finding air. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Catherine cleared her throat. Touching, really. But we have a problem. Lucien's expression hardened. What problem? Isabella Rossi. Catherine pulled up a new photograph. She's called a summit. Every major family in Chicago, tomorrow night. Let me guess, Lucien said. They want to discuss the Serena problem. They want to discuss whether having a wife makes you weak enough to kill. Serena's blood ran cold. Lucien just smiled. Good. Let them try. Lucien! Catherine's voice held genuine concern. This isn't a few soldiers. This is every boss in the city. If they decide you're a liability, then I'll remind them why I'm the boss and they're not. He turned to Serena. Tomorrow night, you're coming with me. Like hell she is, Catherine snapped. That's a death sentence. She wants to see everything. Lucien's eyes never left Serena's face. So she's going to see exactly what it means to be my wife, and every man in that room is going to understand that anyone who touches her dies. Catherine stood abruptly. You're going to start a war. No. Lucien pulled Serena closer. I'm going to end one. And looking into his eyes, seeing the absolute certainty there, the willingness to destroy everything for her, Serena realized the terrible truth. She wasn't Lucien's weakness. She was his reason. And tomorrow night, the entire underworld would see exactly what happened when someone threatened the thing Lucien DeMarco loved. The dress arrived at dawn. Blood-red silk that moved like liquid fire. Backless. Dangerous. The kind of dress that made a statement before you even opened your mouth. Serena stared at it hanging in the penthouse bedroom, and her hands shook. You don't have to wear it, Lucien said from the doorway. He'd been awake all night. She could see it in the shadows under his eyes, the tension carved into his shoulders. You don't have to come at all. Yes, I do. She turned to face him. You said I wanted to see everything. This is everything. This is a room full of killers deciding whether I'm weak enough to destroy. His jaw tightened. And they'll use you as evidence. Then let them. Serena crossed to him, placed her palm flat against his chest, felt his heart hammering beneath expensive fabric. I'm done hiding, Lucien. If I'm your wife, then I stand beside you, not behind you. Something fierce and terrible flashed across his face. You have no idea what you're walking into. So tell me. Lucien grabbed her wrist. Not hard, just firm enough to make his point. Isabella Rossi wants me dead. She's convinced every family in Chicago that I've gone soft, that loving you has made me vulnerable. And tonight, she's going to push them to vote on whether I'm still fit to lead. And if they vote no, then they'll try to kill me. He said it like he was discussing the weather. And when they fail, I'll kill every last one of them. Serena's breath caught. Lucien, I won't let them touch you. His other hand came up, framing her face. No matter what happens tonight, no matter how bad it gets, I will keep you safe. That's not what I'm worried about. Then what? She looked into his eyes, those amber eyes that had haunted her since the moment they met. I'm worried that you'll do something stupid trying to protect me, that you'll get yourself killed because you can't stand the thought of me getting hurt. Lucien smiled, sharp, predatory. You're absolutely right to worry about that. Lucien, he kissed her, hard and desperate, and like he was memorizing the taste of her in case it was the last time. When he pulled back, his eyes were dark with something that looked like grief. Wear the dress, he said quietly. Let them see exactly what I'm willing to die for. They arrived at the summit just after sunset. The location was an abandoned cathedral on the south side, all crumbling stone and shattered stained glass. The kind of place that had been forgotten by everyone except the people who needed somewhere off the grid to conduct business. Armed men lined the entrance, 10, 20, more than Serena could count. They parted like water as Lucien's car pulled up, but their eyes tracked her through the tinted windows with predatory interest. Marcus opened her door. Serena stepped out into the Chicago cold wearing nothing but red silk and her wedding ring. The effect was immediate. Every conversation died. Every head turned, and for one suspended moment the entire courtyard went absolutely silent. Then the whispers started. That's her? DeMarco's wife. Jesus, she's actually here. Lucien appeared beside her, hand settling on the small of her back. He wore all black tonight, suit, shirt, even his tie. Like he was dressed for a funeral. Maybe he was. Stay close. he murmured. Don't speak unless spoken to. And if shooting starts, I run? You hit the ground and let me handle it. His fingers pressed into her spine, possessive. I mean it, Serena. No heroics, no trying to save me. You survive. That's your only job tonight. She didn't promise anything. They walked into the cathedral together. The interior was worse than the outside. Pews had been shoved against the walls to create an open space in the center. Makeshift lighting cast harsh shadows across the assembled crowd. And seated in a semicircle around a raised platform were the most dangerous people Serena had ever seen. 12 men and 1 woman, each representing a different criminal empire, each looking at Lucien like they were deciding whether to kill him now or wait until after dinner. Isabella Rossi sat in the center. She was smaller than Serena expected, petite, almost delicate, wearing a white suit that made her look like an angel cosplaying as a mobster. But her eyes, cold, calculating, absolutely merciless, gave away the truth. This woman had killed before, would kill again, and was planning to kill tonight. Lucien? Isabella's voice carried across the cathedral with practiced ease. How kind of you to join us, and you brought a guest. Her gaze slid to Serena. Mrs. DeMarco, what a lovely dress. Red really is your color. Isabella. Lucien's voice was flat, controlled. Let's skip the pleasantries. You called this summit to question my leadership, so question it. Direct as always. Isabella stood, moving with the grace of a dancer or a killer. Probably both. Very well, I'll be blunt. You've become a liability, Lucien. Your obsession with your wife has made you reckless, violent, unpredictable. I've always been violent. Yes, but you used to be strategic about it. She gestured to the assembled bosses. You've killed 37 people in 6 weeks, started conflicts with families who were neutral, destabilized alliances that took years to build, all because you can't control yourself where she's concerned. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the crowd. Serena felt Lucien's hand tighten on her back. Those 37 people, he said quietly, threatened what's mine. I removed threats. That's not reckless. That's efficient. No. Amanda Isabella's left spoke up, older, scarred. That's obsession. And obsession makes you weak. Weak? Lucien's laugh was sharp enough to cut. I've expanded our operations into 3 new territories this year, increased revenue by 40%. Eliminated every rival stupid enough to challenge us. If that's weak, I'd hate to see what you consider strong. You've also made us targets, another voice called out, female, hard. Every family in the Midwest is watching you, waiting to see if the great Lucien DeMarco has finally lost his mind over a girl. She's not a girl. Lucien's voice dropped to something lethal. She's my wife, and anyone who forgets that won't live long enough to regret it. Isabella smiled. And there it is, the heart of the problem. You care more about her than about the empire, more about her than about any of us. She turned to address the assembled bosses. A leader who can't separate emotion from business is a leader who will get us all killed. Then challenge me. Lucien released Serena and stepped forward. You want my position? Take it. Right here. Right now. Let's settle this the old way. The cathedral went silent. Challenge by combat was brutal, final. Winner took everything. Loser died bleeding on the floor. Isabella's smile widened. I was hoping you'd say that. She snapped her fingers. The doors burst open, and 6 men entered carrying someone between them. Serena's heart stopped, because the person they dragged into the cathedral, bloodied, beaten, barely conscious, was her father. Dad! The scream tore out of her before she could stop it. Thomas Vale's head lifted. His eyes found hers, and the look of absolute defeat on his face made something inside Serena shatter. Let him go, she heard herself say. This has nothing to do with him. It has everything to do with him. Isabella walked over to where they dumped Thomas on the stone floor. This is what Lucien doesn't understand. In our world, everything you love is a weapon someone else can use against you. She pulled out a gun, pressed it against Thomas's temple. So here's my challenge, Lucien. You want to keep your position, your empire, your precious wife? She cocked the gun. Choose one. Time stopped. Serena couldn't breathe, couldn't think, Couldn't do anything except stare at her father kneeling on the ground with a gun to his head. "You're bluffing," Lucien said, but his voice had lost its certainty. "Am I?" Isabella's finger moved to the trigger. "I'll give you 10 seconds to decide. The Empire or the girl. Choose wisely." "Don't!" Thomas coughed blood. "Don't choose me, sweetheart. I'm dying anyway." "Dad, shut up." 10. Isabella began counting. Lucien didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there with every muscle in his body coiled tight enough to snap. 9. Serena's mind raced. There had to be a way out. Had to be something she could do, some bargain she could make. 8. "I'll leave him." The words burst out before she could stop them. "I'll divorce Lucien, walk away, never come back, just let my father go." "Serena, no." Lucien started toward her. 7. "I mean it." Serena stepped forward, away from Lucien, toward Isabella. "You want proof he cares more about me than the Empire? Fine. You have it. Now let my father go and I'll disappear." Isabella paused her counting, studied Serena with clinical interest. "You'd sacrifice yourself for him?" "In a heartbeat." "Interesting." Isabella's smile turned cruel. "But I don't want you to leave, Mrs. DeMarco. I want you to stay. I want Lucien to watch while I kill everyone he loves and take everything he's built." She turned back to Thomas. 6. "Wait." Serena lunged forward. Lucien caught her, spun her around, and the look in his eyes was absolutely feral. "Don't you dare!" he snarled. "Don't you fucking dare sacrifice yourself." 5. "I can't let her kill him." "She's not going to kill anyone." Lucien released Serena and turned to face Isabella. "Because I accept your challenge." Isabella's eyebrows rose. "Which part?" "All of it." He spread his arms wide. "You want to know if I'm weak? If loving her has destroyed my judgment? Fine. Prove it. Combat. You and me. Winner takes the Empire. Loser dies." He paused. "But when I win, you release Thomas. And you swear on your family's honor that you'll never touch my wife again. And when I win, you won't." Isabella studied him for a long moment. Then she smiled. "Accepted. But I have one condition." "Name it." She gestured to Serena. "She stays in the room, watches every second. I want her to see exactly what her love costs you." Lucien's jaw clenched. "Fine." "No." Serena grabbed his arm. "Lucien, you can't." "Yes, I can." He pulled her close, kissed her forehead. "I love you. Remember that. No matter what happens next, I love you." Then he shoved her toward Marcus, who'd appeared from somewhere in the crowd. "Keep her safe," Lucien ordered. "If I lose—" "You won't," Marcus said. "If I lose, get her and Thomas out of here. Take them somewhere Isabella will never find them." Lucien. But he was already walking toward the center of the cathedral. Isabella met him there. Someone tossed them each a knife, and the fight began. It was brutal, savage. Nothing like the choreographed violence Serena had seen in movies. This was real, raw. Two predators trying to kill each other with surgical efficiency. Isabella moved like a dancer, fast, precise, using her smaller size to slip under Lucien's guard. She scored first blood within seconds, her knife opening a gash across his ribs that immediately soaked through his shirt. Lucien didn't even flinch. He just smiled and came at her harder. They moved across the stone floor in a deadly ballet. Knives flashing, blood spraying. The assembled bosses watching with the detached interest of people who'd seen this before and would see it again. Serena couldn't look away. Even when Isabella's knife caught Lucien across the shoulder, even when he retaliated by slamming her into a broken pew hard enough to crack wood, even when both of them were bleeding from a dozen cuts and still fighting like they could do this forever. "He's going to die," someone murmured behind her. "No." Serena's hands clenched into fists. "He won't." But Isabella was good. Better than good. She fought like someone who'd spent her entire life preparing to kill Lucien DeMarco. And slowly, terrifyingly slowly, she started gaining the upper hand. A vicious slash across Lucien's thigh that made him stumble. A knee to his ribs that drove the air from his lungs. A knife to his throat that stopped just short of cutting his carotid. "Yield," Isabella hissed. Lucien's eyes found Serena's across the cathedral, and he smiled. Never. He headbutted Isabella so hard Serena heard her nose break from 20 feet away. Isabella stumbled back, blood pouring down her face, and Lucien pressed his advantage. He was bigger, stronger, and now that Isabella's perfect technique had been disrupted by pain and shock, he fought like the monster everyone said he was. Brutal, efficient, absolutely merciless. He got her in a chokehold. She stabbed him in the side. He didn't let go, just squeezed tighter while blood poured from the wound in his ribs and Isabella's face turned purple. "Lucien!" Serena screamed. "Stop! You're killing her!" "That's the point," Marcus muttered. Isabella's struggles weakened. Her knife fell from her hand. Her eyes started to roll back. And Lucien just kept squeezing, until she went completely limp. He dropped her body like garbage. The cathedral erupted. Half the bosses surged to their feet in protest. The other half just stared in shocked silence. And Isabella's men reached for their weapons before Marcus and Lucien's soldiers materialized from the shadows with guns already drawn. "Stand down!" Lucien's voice cracked like a whip. "Isabella challenged me. I won. Anyone who has a problem with that can be next." No one moved. Lucien swayed slightly, blood pouring from multiple wounds, and Serena broke free from Marcus's grip to run to him. She caught him before he collapsed. "You're insane," she sobbed into his chest. "You could have died." "But I didn't." His hand came up to cup her face. "I told you, I'll burn the city down before I let anyone hurt you." One of Isabella's men, the one who'd had a gun on Thomas, raised his weapon, aimed at Lucien's head. Time slowed. Serena saw it happening, saw the finger tightening on the trigger, saw the angle that would put a bullet through her husband's skull. She moved without thinking, threw herself between Lucien and the gun. The shot rang out. Pain exploded through her shoulder. She hit the ground hard, vision going white, and distantly heard Lucien roar with absolute rage. Then gunfire erupted everywhere. Serena tried to move, tried to see what was happening, but her shoulder was on fire and her vision kept blurring, and all she could hear was screaming and shooting and Lucien's voice bellowing orders. Strong hands grabbed her, lifted her. She blinked up into Marcus's grim face. "Stay with me, Mrs. DeMarco," he ordered. "Don't you dare die on him, not after everything." Another explosion of gunfire, more screaming. Then Lucien was there, materializing out of the chaos like an avenging angel, covered in so much blood Serena couldn't tell what was his and what belonged to other people. "Give her to me," he snarled at Marcus. "You can barely stand. Give her to me." Marcus carefully transferred Serena into Lucien's arms. She felt him stumble, felt him catch himself through sheer will, felt him hold her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. "I've got you," he whispered into her hair. "I've got you, and I'm not letting go." "My dad, Marcus has him. He's safe." "Isabella? Dead. They're all dead." Lucien started moving toward the exit, his soldiers forming a protective circle around them. "Everyone who threatened you, everyone who thought they could use you against me, dead." Serena's vision started to fade. "Stay awake," Lucien demanded. "Serena, look at me. Look at me." She forced her eyes open, found his face inches from hers. "I love you," he said fiercely. "Do you hear me? I love you and you're not allowed to die. That's an order." She tried to smile. "You can't order me. Watch me." The world went black. Serena woke up to the smell of antiseptic and the steady beep of medical equipment. Hospital, private room, expensive enough that she knew Lucien's money was involved. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain lanced through her shoulder like someone had stuck a hot poker through the muscle. "Don't move," Lucien's voice came from beside the bed. She turned her head carefully. He sat in a chair pulled close to her bedside, looking like death warmed over. Bandages covered most of his torso. Stitches closed a gash above his eyebrow. His left arm was in a sling, but he was alive. "You look terrible," Serena croaked. "You got shot." His hand found hers, squeezed gently. "You threw yourself in front of a bullet meant for me. You threw yourself in front of an entire cathedral full of killers for me. That's different." "How?" "Because I'm expendable. You're not." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "Don't ever do that again, Serena. Don't ever risk yourself for me." Then don't give me a reason to. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Lucien leaned forward and kissed her, gentle, careful, like she was made of glass. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. I thought I lost you, he whispered. You didn't. I would have burned the world down if you'd died. I know. She squeezed his hand. My dad, recovering, 3 rooms down. Marcus is guarding him personally. Relief flooded through her. And Isabella? Dead, along with 7 of her top lieutenants and anyone else who decided tonight was a good night to challenge me. Lucien's expression hardened. The Rossi family is finished. Their operations have been absorbed, their territory claimed, and anyone who wants to question my leadership knows exactly what I'm capable of. So you won. We won. He brought her hand to his lips. You stood beside me when every rational person would have run. You took a bullet for me. His voice cracked. You chose me, Serena. Even knowing what I am, what I've done, you chose me. I love you, she said simply. Monster and all. Lucien closed his eyes. When he opened them again, they were filled with something that looked like wonder. I don't deserve you. Probably not. I'm never letting you go. I know, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. Serena smiled despite the pain. That's a long time, Lucien. I have a long memory. He stood carefully, minding his injuries, and leaned over the hospital bed. Rest, heal, and when you're strong enough, I'm taking you somewhere safe while I finish cleaning up this mess. No. He blinked. No, I'm not hiding anymore. Serena met his gaze. I'm your wife, your partner, and if we're doing this, if we're really building a life together, then I stand beside you, no matter what comes next. For a long moment, Lucien just stared at her. Then he smiled, sharp, dangerous, and somehow tender. You're going to be the death of me, Serena DeMarco. Probably. He kissed her again, deeper this time, a promise and a claim all at once. And when he pulled back, his eyes held something that looked like peace. Get some rest, he murmured. Tomorrow, we start rebuilding. Rebuilding what? Everything. He brushed hair back from her face. The empire, our life. A future where you don't have to be afraid anymore. I'm not afraid, Serena said quietly. Not when I'm with you. Lucien's expression cracked, and for just a moment the monster everyone feared looked like a man who'd finally found something worth being human for. He settled back into the chair beside her bed, took her hand, and held it like he was never letting go. Outside, Chicago burned with the aftermath of violence. But inside that hospital room, surrounded by beeping machines and antiseptic smells, and the weight of everything they'd survived, Serena Vale DeMarco closed her eyes and finally felt safe. Because she'd married a monster, and monsters protected what they loved, no matter the cost. Recovery was slower than either of them wanted. Serena spent 3 days in the hospital before Lucien finally convinced the doctors to discharge her. 3 days of antiseptic smells and nurses checking her vitals and physical therapists teaching her how to move her shoulder without screaming. 3 days of watching Lucien pace her hospital room like a caged animal, directing his empire from a chair beside her bed while pretending he wasn't bleeding through his own bandages. Her father was released the same day. Thomas Vale looked 10 years older than the last time she'd seen him standing upright. The cancer treatment had saved his life, but the beating from Isabella's men had broken something inside him that medicine couldn't fix. He moved carefully now, spoke quietly, and looked at his daughter with a mixture of pride and guilt that made Serena want to scream. I'm sorry, he said the first time they were alone together. I should have fought harder, should have found a way to... Dad! Serena cut him off. You survived. That's enough. Is it? Thomas looked down at his hands. They still shook slightly. You married a monster to save me, got shot protecting him, nearly died because I was too weak to... Stop. She reached across the space between their wheelchairs, because apparently getting shot meant she needed wheels for a few more days, and grabbed his hand. You didn't ask for any of this. I made my choices, and I'd make them again. Even knowing what he is? Serena thought about Lucien, about the blood on his hands and the violence in his eyes, and the way he'd held her like she was the only thing keeping him human. Especially knowing what he is, she said quietly. Thomas studied her for a long moment. Then he squeezed her hand and looked away, and Serena knew he understood even if he didn't approve. Some choices you made with your head, some you made with your heart, and some you made because the alternative was watching everyone you loved die. Lucien took them to a different penthouse, newer, bigger. So far above Chicago that the city looked like a toy beneath them. Floor-to-ceiling bulletproof glass, security that made the White House look casual, and enough space that Thomas could have an entire wing to himself while Serena recovered. "It's temporary," Lucien explained as he carried her through the front door, despite her protests that she could walk. "Until I'm sure no one's stupid enough to try again." "How long is temporary?" "However long it takes." He set her down on a couch that probably cost more than her old apartment and disappeared into what looked like a command center disguised as an office. Serena didn't see him again until midnight. When she woke from a nightmare about gunfire and her father's blood, Lucien was sitting in a chair beside her bed, watching her with eyes that hadn't slept in what looked like days. "You should rest," she said. "So should you." "I was, until the dreams started." Lucien's expression darkened. "What kind of dreams?" "The kind where I watch you die." She sat up carefully, minding her shoulder. Over and over, different ways, same ending. He stood and crossed to the bed, settling beside her with the careful movements of someone minding half a dozen injuries. "I'm not dead." "I know." "I'm not going anywhere." "I know that too." She leaned against him and he wrapped his good arm around her shoulders. "But my brain hasn't caught up yet." They sat like that for a while, just breathing together, existing in the same space without words. Finally, Lucien spoke. "I need to tell you something." Serena's chest tightened. "That sounds ominous." "It's about your father's debt, the real story." He paused. "You deserve to know all of it." She pulled back to look at him. "I already know you fabricated it. Isabella told me, remember? She told you half the truth." Lucien's jaw clenched. "The debt was real, Serena. $400,000. Your father actually owed it." The world tilted. "What?" "The hospital bills were legitimate. The treatment costs were accurate. I didn't inflate anything." He met her eyes. "What I did was make sure the insurance company denied his claims. Made sure the hospital called in the debt early. Made sure you felt desperate enough to consider alternatives you'd normally never touch." Serena's throat closed. "Why?" "Because 6 months before I walked into Mama Lucia's, I saw you." His voice went quiet. "You were leaving the hospital, exhausted, crying, so goddamn beautiful it hurt to look at you. And I knew, the way you know things you can't explain, that you were mine. So you destroyed my life to make it true. I orchestrated circumstances, created opportunities." He touched her face. "But you still chose, Serena. Every step of the way. You could have said no to the wedding, could have run when I gave you chances, could have refused to love me even when I gave you every reason to. You manipulated me. I did. And I'd do it again." No apology in his voice, just brutal honesty. "Because the alternative was watching you slip through my fingers, losing you before I ever had you, and I'm too selfish for that." Serena should have been furious, should have pushed him away, should have done literally anything except press her forehead against his and close her eyes. "I hate that I love you," she whispered. "I know. I hate that you're exactly the monster everyone says you are." "I know that too. And I hate that I'd choose you again, every single time." Lucien's hand tightened on her waist. "Then we're both damned." "Probably." He kissed her. Slow and deep, and like he was trying to memorize every detail of this moment. When they broke apart, his eyes held something that looked like peace. "I'm getting out," he said. Serena blinked. "Out of what?" "The business, the empire, all of it." He gestured to the city below them. "I've spent the last 3 days liquidating assets, transferring operations to people who can run them without me, setting up legitimate businesses to replace the illegal ones." "Lucien, I almost lost you." His voice cracked. "Twice." And I realized something while you were unconscious in that hospital bed. I don't want to be the king of Chicago's underworld anymore. I just want to be your husband. Tears burned behind Serena's eyes. You can't just walk away from an empire. Watch me. They'll come after you. Let them try. He cupped her face. I killed Isabella Rossi in front of every major boss in the city. Survived a bullet meant for my head. Won a war while bleeding from a dozen wounds. Anyone stupid enough to challenge me now deserves what they get. And if someone does, then I'll handle it. But I'm done building my life around violence, Serena. I'm done sacrificing everything for power. I don't even want any more. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. You taught me something. You want to know what it was? What? That being feared is easy. Being loved is terrifying. And I'd rather be terrified with you than powerful without you. Serena kissed him, desperate and grateful, and absolutely certain this man would be the death of her, or the saving of her. She wasn't sure which. Maybe both. The next 3 months passed in a strange, suspended reality. Lucian kept his word. He dismantled the DeMarco empire piece by piece, transferring operations to trusted lieutenants and severing ties with anyone too violent or too stupid to go legitimate. It was slow, dangerous, and absolutely ruthless. But he did it. Serena watched him transform from Chicago's most feared mafia boss into something that almost resembled a normal businessman. He bought a construction company, invested in real estate, started a security consulting firm that was definitely still connected to his old world, but operated just inside the boundaries of legal. And every night, he came home to her, sometimes covered in blood from negotiations that hadn't gone peacefully, sometimes exhausted from 18-hour days restructuring empires. But always, he came home. Serena finished nursing school in the spring. She walked across that stage wearing a cap and gown, accepting her degree while security guards disguised as proud parents watched from the audience. Lucian sat in the front row looking completely out of place in his expensive suit, but when they called her name, he stood and applauded like she'd just won an Oscar. After the ceremony, he took her to dinner at a restaurant so expensive the menu didn't have prices. I'm proud of you, he said over wine that cost more than her first car. For graduating? For not giving up. He reached across the table and took her hand. You could have let everything I did break you, could have become bitter or broken or just gone. But you fought, survived, became exactly who you were always meant to be. A nurse married to a reformed crime boss. A woman who saves lives. He smiled. The opposite of everything I am. Were, Serena corrected. Everything you were. Lucien's smile turned sad. I'll never be fully clean, Serena. You know that, right? The things I've done, the people I've killed. That doesn't just wash away because I bought some legitimate businesses. I know. And you're okay with that? She thought about it, really thought about the blood on his hands and the violence in his past, and the fact that he'd orchestrated her entire life to trap her. I'm okay with you, she said finally. Monster and all, past and present, because you're trying, Lucian, and that's more than most people ever do. He brought her hand to his lips, kissed her knuckles, and looked at her like she'd just given him absolution he didn't deserve. I love you, he said quietly. More than I thought I was capable of loving anything. I know. And I'm going to spend the rest of my life making sure you never regret choosing me. You already said that in the hospital. I meant it then. I mean it now. His eyes held hers. I'll mean it every day for the rest of our lives. Serena squeezed his hand and tried not to think about how absolutely insane it was that she'd fallen in love with the man who'd destroyed her life to make her his. Mbak. Summer arrived with Chicago heat and news that made Serena's world tilt sideways. She was pregnant. The test showed up positive on a random Tuesday morning while Lucien was out meeting with contractors about a building renovation. Serena stared at those 2 lines for what felt like hours, mind racing through implications and impossibilities and the absolutely terrifying reality that she was about to bring a child into a world where their father had once been Chicago's most feared killer. When Lucien came home that evening, she was sitting on the couch holding the test like a live grenade. He took one look at her face and crossed the room in 3 strides. What's wrong? Serena handed him the test. Lucien stared at it, blinked, looked at her, looked back at the test. You're pregnant. Yes. We're having a baby. Yes. For a long moment, he didn't move, didn't speak, just stood there holding a plastic stick that had just changed both their lives. Then his knees gave out. Lucien DeMarco, the man who'd faced down armies, survived assassination attempts, and killed Chicago's most dangerous criminals without flinching, collapsed to his knees in front of her and pressed his face against her stomach. I'm going to be a father, he whispered. Serena's hands came up to tangle in his hair. Are you okay with that? I'm terrified. That makes two of us. He looked up and his eyes were wet. I don't know how to be a good father, Serena. I don't know how to be anything except what I was. What if I screw this up? What if I turn our child into... You won't. She cupped his face. Because you're not the man you used to be. You're better. And you're going to teach our kid to be better than both of us. How can you be so sure? Because you love me enough to change, and you'll love them even more. Lucien closed his eyes, pressed his forehead against her stomach again, and Serena felt him shake with something that might have been tears or laughter, or both. I'm going to protect you, he said fiercely. Both of you. Nothing in this world will ever hurt either of you. I swear it. I know. And I'm going to be better. For them. For you. For... His voice cracked. For the family I never thought I deserved. Serena pulled him up and kissed him, and felt something inside her chest crack open. Because this broken, violent, absolutely devoted man who'd orchestrated her destruction and then rebuilt her into something stronger, was going to be the father of her child. And somehow, impossibly, that felt right. Her father took the news about the pregnancy with the resigned acceptance of a man who'd stopped being surprised by anything. A grandchild, Thomas said, staring out the window of his private suite. He looked healthier now. The cancer had gone into remission. His hands barely shook. With Lucien DeMarco as the father. I know it's complicated. Complicated? Thomas laughed. Harsh. Bitter. Sweetheart, you married the man who manipulated you into loving him, got shot protecting him from his enemies, and now you're carrying his child. Complicated doesn't even begin to cover it. Serena sat beside him. Are you angry? I don't know what I am. He turned to face her. I'm grateful to him. He saved my life. Gave me a future I wouldn't have had otherwise. But he also destroyed yours to do it, and I don't know how to reconcile those two things. You don't have to. Don't I? Thomas's voice softened. You're my daughter, Serena, and all I've ever wanted was for you to be happy. Are you? Happy? She thought about it, really thought about it. About the blood and the violence and the manipulation and the lies. About Lucien's hands around her throat and his lips on her skin and the way he looked at her like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Yes, she said finally. I am. Thomas studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded slowly. Then that's enough for me. He reached out and squeezed her hand. Just promise me something. What? If he ever hurts you, really hurts you, you'll leave. You'll take that baby and you'll run and you won't look back. Dad, promise me, Serena. She squeezed his hand back. I promise. It was a lie. They both knew it, but some promises were made to be broken, and some bonds, forged in blood and desperation and absolutely catastrophic love, couldn't be severed, even if you wanted to. The months passed faster than Serena expected. Her body changed, rounded, grew heavy with the weight of new life. Lucien hovered like an overprotective shadow, hiring the best doctors, building a nursery that looked like something out of a magazine, and generally driving her absolutely insane with his constant vigilance. I'm pregnant, she told him one night after he'd forbidden her from reaching for a book on a high shelf. Not made of glass. You're carrying my child. That makes you more valuable than anything else in this world. Lucien, no arguments. He pulled her against him, hand splaying across her swollen belly. I already almost lost you once. I'm not taking chances. She wanted to argue, wanted to tell him he was being ridiculous, but the way he touched her, like she was something sacred, made the words die in her throat. Winter came early that year. Snow blanketed Chicago in white. turning the city into something almost beautiful. Serena spent most of her time at home now, too pregnant to work, too exhausted to do much except read and sleep and wait for the baby who seemed determined to stay put until spring. Lucien ran his businesses from the penthouse, transforming their home into a command center that was somehow both domestic and dangerous. He took calls about construction deals while assembling a crib, negotiated contracts while making her tea, ran an empire while pretending to be a normal husband preparing for fatherhood. It was surreal, peaceful, and absolutely perfectly right. One evening, while snow fell past their windows and Serena sat reading on the couch, Lucien appeared with a small black box. "What's this?" she asked. "Open it." Inside was a necklace. Simple, elegant, a single diamond pendant on a platinum chain. "It's beautiful," Serena breathed. "It's a promise." Lucien took the necklace and fastened it around her throat. "When you wear this, you're protected. Anyone who sees it knows you're mine, and anyone stupid enough to threaten you knows exactly what I'll do to them." "Lucien, I know I can't erase what I did to you, can't undo the manipulation or the lies or the way I trapped you." His hands settled on her shoulders. "But I can promise you this. From now until the day I die, I will protect you. I will fight for you. I will be whatever you need me to be." He pressed his lips to her temple. "You saved me, Serena, from myself, from the monster I was becoming, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life being worthy of that salvation." Serena turned and kissed him, deep and slow and filled with everything she couldn't put into words. When they broke apart, she touched the necklace. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For catching me when I fell." Lucien smiled. "You never fell, Serena. You jumped, and I'll spend forever being grateful you did." Their daughter was born on a freezing February morning. 7 pounds, 3 ounces. Dark hair like her father, eyes that would probably turn amber given time, and lungs powerful enough that her first cry echoed through the entire delivery room like a declaration of war. Lucien held her for the first time with hands that shook. "She's so small," he whispered. "She's perfect," Serena corrected from the hospital bed. The baby, they decided to name her Elena, squirmed in his arms, and Lucien looked absolutely terrified. "What if I drop her?" "You won't." "What if I mess this up?" "You won't." "Serena," his voice cracked. "I've killed people, destroyed lives, built an empire on blood and violence. How am I supposed to be a father to something this innocent?" Serena reached out and took his hand. "The same way you became a husband to me. One day at a time, one choice at a time, deciding to be better than you were yesterday." Lucien looked down at Elena, then back at Serena, and something in his expression shifted, softened, became something that looked almost like peace. "I love you," he said quietly. "Both of you. More than I thought I was capable of loving anything. We love you too. Even knowing what I am, especially knowing what you are." Serena smiled, monster and all. Lucien laughed, soft and broken and absolutely real. And for the first time since she'd met him, Serena saw him completely at peace with who he'd become. Not the Ice Prince of Chicago, not the killer who'd built an empire on fear, just a man holding his daughter and looking at his wife like they were the only things in the world that mattered. Chapped. They brought Elena home to a penthouse that had been transformed into something that almost resembled normal. No more war rooms, no more emergency protocols, just a nursery with soft colors and a crib that Lucien had assembled himself and enough baby supplies to stock a small country. Serena settled into motherhood with the same determination she'd brought to everything else. Sleepless nights, endless feedings, the beautiful chaos of keeping a tiny human alive while running on 2 hours of sleep and cold coffee. Lucien hovered like an overprotective shadow, handling middle-of-the-night diaper changes with the same intensity he'd once brought to contract negotiations. He was surprisingly good at it, patient, gentle, absolutely devoted. "You're a natural," Serena told him one night while he rocked Elena back to sleep. "I'm terrified every second of every day," he admitted, convinced I'm going to break her or do something wrong or... "Welcome to parenthood," he laughed quietly. "Is it always like this?" "I don't know. I've never done it before either." She moved to stand beside him, watching their daughter sleep. But we'll figure it out together. Lucien looked at her. Together. Together, she confirmed. He shifted Elena to one arm and pulled Serena close with the other, and they stood there in the soft glow of the nursery nightlight, watching their daughter breathe, surrounded by a peace neither of them had ever expected to find. Outside, Chicago still burned with corruption and violence and all the darkness they'd left behind. But inside their home, there was light, hard-won, blood-bought, absolutely real. Serena returned to work when Elena was 6 months old. Not because she needed the money. Lucien had made sure they'd never worry about finances again. But because she'd spent 4 years studying to become a nurse, and she wasn't about to let that go to waste. She took a position at County General, Pediatrics, the same hospital where her father had been treated, where she'd watched him nearly die before Lucien's money saved him. It felt right somehow. Closing the circle. Lucien didn't love the idea of her working, hated the thought of her exposed to the world without his protection. But he hired the best security money could buy and learned to let her go every morning without locking her in a cage. "You're getting better at this," Serena told him one morning while she got ready for a shift. "At what?" "Not being a monster," he smiled. "I'm still a monster, Serena. I've just learned to hide it better." "No." She crossed to him and pressed her palm against his chest, felt his heart beating beneath expensive fabric. "You've learned to be human. There's a difference." "Is there?" "Yes." She kissed him, quick and certain. "Monsters don't change. Humans do. And you, Lucien DeMarco, have changed more than anyone I've ever met." He pulled her close, held her like she was the only thing keeping him grounded. "I love you," he whispered into her hair. "Thank you for teaching a monster how to become a man. Thank you for catching me when I fell." They stood like that for a moment, just breathing together, existing in the same space. Then Serena pulled away, grabbed her bag, and headed for the door. "Be safe," Lucien called after her. "Always am." "And Serena?" She turned. He stood silhouetted against the floor-to-ceiling windows. Chicago spread out behind him like a kingdom he'd conquered and abandoned. "Come home to me." It wasn't a request. It was a prayer. "Always," she promised, and meant it. Check. That evening, Serena walked through the doors of County General and felt something inside her settle. This was where she belonged, not in penthouses or war rooms or the wreckage of Lucien's former empire, but here, saving lives, making a difference, being the opposite of everything he'd once been. She treated a boy with a broken arm, a girl with pneumonia, a baby with a fever that broke around midnight, leaving exhausted parents crying with relief. And when her shift ended at dawn, she walked out into Chicago cold, wearing scrubs and exhaustion and a diamond necklace that marked her as Lucien DeMarco's wife. Security waited by the car. Same faces she'd seen for months now. Good men, loyal, paid extremely well to make sure nothing happened to her. They drove through a city just waking up, past neighborhoods Lucien had once controlled through fear, toward a penthouse that had stopped feeling like a prison and started feeling like home. When she walked through the door, she found Lucien in the nursery. He sat in the rocking chair they'd bought together, holding Elena against his chest while she slept. His eyes were closed, his expression peaceful. Serena's heart clenched, because this man who'd orchestrated her destruction and then rebuilt her into something stronger, had become the father she never knew she wanted for her child. "Hey," she said softly. Lucien's eyes opened. "Hey yourself. How was work?" "Exhausting, beautiful, everything I needed it to be." She crossed to him and pressed a kiss to his forehead. "How was your night?" "Elena had a nightmare around 2. Took an hour to get her back down." He smiled tiredly. "But we managed." "You're getting good at this." "I'm getting better." He stood carefully, transferring Elena to her crib with practiced ease. "Still terrified I'm going to mess it all up." "Join the club." They stood together watching their daughter sleep, and Serena felt the weight of everything they'd survived settle over her like a blanket. The manipulation, the violence, the blood, and the lies, and the absolutely catastrophic love that had transformed them both. "Do you regret it?" Lucien asked quietly. "Any of it?" Serena thought about the girl she'd been before him, broke, desperate, drowning in debt and exhaustion and a future that looked like nothing but struggle. Then she thought about the woman she'd become. A wife? A mother? A nurse saving lives in the same hospital where her father had nearly died. No, she said finally, I don't regret any of it. Not even the manipulation? Not even that. She turned to face him. You gave me a choice, Lucian. Maybe not a fair one. Maybe not one I would have made under different circumstances, but I chose you, and I'd choose you again. He pulled her close. I don't deserve you. Probably not, but I'm keeping you anyway. I know. They kissed, slow and deep and filled with everything they'd built from the ashes of who they used to be. When they broke apart, Lucien pressed his forehead against hers. I used to think power was everything, he said quietly. That being feared was the same as being strong. That love was a weakness that would get me killed. And now I know that loving you is the bravest thing I've ever done. He cupped her face. You terrify me, Serena DeMarco, because you're the one thing in this world I can't control, can't manipulate, can't force to stay if you decide to leave. I'm not leaving. I know, but you could, and that scares me more than anything I've ever faced. Serena kissed him again. Then I guess we're both scared. Of what? Of how much we love each other. Of how badly we could hurt each other if we wanted to. Of raising a child in a world that's still dangerous, even though you've tried to make it safe. We'll figure it out. Together? Together, he promised. They stood like that for a long time, just holding each other in the soft glow of the nursery nightlight while their daughter slept and Chicago burned quietly outside. And Serena realized that this imperfect, complicated, absolutely real life they'd built from blood and desperation and catastrophic love was exactly what she'd been searching for all along. Not a fairy tale, not a romance novel ending where everything was perfect and nothing hurt, but something better, something real. A monster who'd learned to be human, a girl who'd learned to be strong, and a love that had survived everything the world threw at it. Serena closed her eyes and let herself believe that maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. Not perfect, not easy, but okay. And sometimes, okay was more than enough. Years passed. Elena grew into a bright, fierce child with her father's eyes and her mother's stubbornness. Lucien's legitimate businesses thrived. Serena's career flourished. Thomas Vale lived to see his granddaughter's 5th birthday before the cancer finally claimed him, peaceful and surrounded by family. And through it all, Lucien and Serena built something that looked almost like normal. Breakfast together. Bedtime stories. Family dinners where Elena demanded to know why her daddy had so many scars, and Lucien carefully explained that sometimes people made mistakes before they learned to be better. The underworld didn't forget Lucien DeMarco. Couldn't forget him. But he'd carved out a space between his past and his future where he could exist as something other than the monster he'd been. Some nights, Serena still caught him standing by the windows overlooking Chicago, bourbon in hand, looking at the city like a king surveying an abandoned kingdom. "Do you miss it?" she asked one of those nights. "Sometimes," he admitted. "The power, the fear, the certainty that I controlled everything. And other times?" He turned to face her. "Other times I look at you and Elena and realize I never controlled anything that mattered until I learned to let go." Serena crossed to him, took the bourbon from his hand and set it aside, pressed herself against him and felt his arms come around her like coming home. "I love you," she said, "monster and all." "I love you too." He kissed the top of her head. "Thank you for catching me when I fell." She smiled against his chest. "You never fell, Lucien. You jumped, and I'll spend forever being grateful you did." They stood like that while Chicago glittered beneath them, a city full of secrets and violence and all the darkness they'd chosen to leave behind. But inside their home, inside the life they'd built from blood and desperation and absolutely catastrophic love, there was light, hard-won, blood-bought, absolutely, perfectly real. And as Serena closed her eyes and listened to her husband's heartbeat, and her daughter's soft breathing from the nursery down the hall, she realized something that had taken her years to understand. Sometimes the worst choices led to the best outcomes. Sometimes monsters became men. Sometimes girls who thought they were drowning learned they could breathe underwater. And sometimes, just sometimes, falling into darkness was exactly what you needed to find the light. Serena had married a monster who manipulated her into loving him. And she'd do it again, every single time, because that monster had taught her something no one else ever could. That love wasn't about being perfect. It was about choosing each other, again and again, through blood and violence and all the broken pieces of who you used to be. Until the day you looked up and realized you'd built something beautiful from the ruins, something worth fighting for, worth dying for, worth living for. Serena pressed a kiss to Lucian's chest, right over his heart. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For catching me." Lucian's arms tightened around her. "Always," he promised, and meant it. Forever.